I think everyone alive would like to think that there's a cure for cancer. We're now going to talk to James Garner, the CEO of Kazia Therepeutics. And this company is actually looking for a cure for cancer. James, thanks for joining us.
Peter, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
My pleasure. Now, Kazia, it's working to develop new cancer drugs. How does that compare to other areas in the life sciences industries, such as medical devices or diagnostics?
Peter, I think you're right. The life sciences industry is a broad church. We've got companies working in diagnostics, in medical devices, in software, increasingly things like artificial intelligence, people who are reformulating drugs so that, for example, an injection becomes a patch. That sort of thing. We're working in an area of novel drug development. So we're trying to just develop a brand new drug for cancer. And when you look at this in comparison to other parts of the industry, I think it's worth saying that it's a longer process. So development of a new drug classically takes 12 to 15 years end to end. We're right at the end of that process, but it's a long journey.
So how long have you guys been doing this?
We've been doing this for several years now, but the drug's been in development for the better part of about 8 years.
Okay.
So we've got a lot of that work now as water under the bridge, and we're closer to the pointy end. It's a more risky game. The reality is most drugs in development fail, and unlike a device where you can tinker it and you can fine tune it, that's usually not a possibility for a drug. I think and you might say, well, why would an investor look at it?
You've been so honest.
I think the positive thing to say is that for drugs that are successful. Obviously, there's many rewards, but the purely economic reward is that these drugs typically encounter huge commercial markets. So our drug is being developed in a particular form of brain cancer. The commercial opportunity there is conservatively sized at about $1.5 billion US. And there's really very, very few lines of work that offer that kind of economics.
So it specifically would work on brain cancer, or could have wider applications?
Well, Peter, it's been designed for brain cancer, which in itself is unusual because a lot of drugs, really focus on other kinds of cancer than brain cancer. So ours has been tailor-made as a brain cancer drug. Now, having said that, it does have potential applicability in other forms of cancer as well. So part of our long-term thinking is if we're successful in brain cancer, then there are opportunities in lung cancer, in breast cancer, and in other forms of cancer as well.
Okay. So what are the distinguishing features of Kazia's lead program, paxilosib? And what are the things that Kazia believes sets it aside from other cancer drugs that are in development right now?
Peter, there's some really unique things about the paxilosib program. And the first is that this drug was not actually developed by us originally. It was developed by a company in the US called Genentech, and we licensed it in. So it's now our drug moving forward, but it was developed by the most successful cancer drug developer in the world. And these sort of transactions where companies license drugs from each other are very, very common in the United States. Still a little bit less so here in Australia, frankly. But it does mean that the drug has this fantastic heritage and really, really good quality work that's been done at its early development. This wasn't put together in somebody's kitchen. It's been developed by the very, very best in the business. The second thing I think is that, as we touched on, this is a drug that has been specifically designed for brain cancer. So the way it works is to switch off a biochemical switch in the cancer, which we know is switched on in about 90% of these patients. So it's very, very fit for purpose, very targeted to what it does. And one of the big challenges with treating brain cancer is most drugs don't get into the brain. They don't get to the tumor. The brain is very protected. And we know our drug does. It's been designed to do that, does it really well. So all these things really make the drug a little bit separate from most of the drugs out there. And then I think the final thing that's worth saying is we really are at the business end of the drug development process. This is currently in human trials. It's not still being tested in animals. It's in human trials. We've had over 100 patients treated now, so we understand the drug quite well. All the data is pointing in the right direction, and we're really looking at the final step now to get this to market.
So let's be precise about this, James. how advanced is the research? You've given us some time, and also what have been the results so far?
Peter, we're currently in what we call a phase 2 human trial. Now, classically, drugs go through 3 phases of human trials. So, by implication, the next step is the final trial to get the drug through to market, and that's correct for us. Now, that, to put times to it, that could still be a 2.5 to 3 year process. So this isn't going to be on the market in all likelihood next year. It's probably going to take a couple more years to get there. But in the context of the long development cycle of new drugs, this is really within sight of the finish line. In terms of what we're seeing so far, I think we've seen really positive signals all the way through. So in the animal data, the drug clearly is active against models of this tumor. It clearly works in the laboratory. And in the human data, we saw at the end of last year some really positive signals. We saw that the drug showed evidence of delaying progression of the cancer. It was keeping these patients well for longer. And that's a really promising signal at this stage in the development process. So everything's pointing in the right direction, but it's only that final phase 3 trial that really gives us the definitive answer to the question, does it work?
Okay. Is there any real difference between phase 2 and phase 3?
Phase 3 studies are usually larger. They're usually designed to be more confirmatory. So we usually have a pretty good sense the drug's working, but they're designed to confirm that. And crucially for cancer drugs, phase 3 studies usually compare against some sort of existing treatment. And the reason why that's important is when we just have the drug by itself, we never know with certainty what would happen if you didn't give the drug. So if we see some patients benefiting, the question is always, what would happen if they weren't getting the drug? And in a phase 3 study, we answer this by having the patients put into 2 groups. One group gets the drug and one group doesn't. Call a randomized controlled trial. And that's usually only practicable in these larger phase 3 studies, but that's the definitive proof that a drug works.
Okay, so how well is the company financed, and what's been the reception from investors so far?
Peter, we've been really fortunate. We've had great support from institutional investors over the last couple of years. We've had 2 financing rounds, one in 2018, one in 2019. They both raised around $3.5 to $4 million Australian. And they were deliberately very restrained. As a company, the way we've approached our financing is just to finance the next set of milestones. We don't want to give investors to a huge long-term exposure. We want to just finance to the next data readout. And we've had great support from investors. We've done both of these placements were largely to institutional investors, and they've continued to be very supportive of the company's work. As of 30th of June 2019, which was our last financial statements, we had about $5.5 million at bank, and we have obviously access to the federal government R&D tax rebate, which augments that. So we're in pretty good shape right now, but obviously it's something we're always mindful of as a company, and we tend to sort of balance our financing according to the data.
Okay, so what's next for the company, and what should investors expect in 2020?
Peter, there's some really big milestones coming up this year. We'll be sharing more new data from the ongoing phase 2 study. We reported some in November of 2019. That was very well received in the market. We saw about a 40-50% increase in our share price. And we're expecting to have more data, certainly in the first half of this year, out of that study. So I think investors will be watching that really closely, and I think if that keeps up the positive momentum in the data, I think that should be really positive for the company. Meanwhile, we're already starting preparation to take the drug into a pivotal study, a registration study, a study to get it on market. And that work will be ramping up through the first half. We hope to be recruiting patients into that study in the second half. And as I say, that will really launch the final chapter in this drug's development, and it'll put it on a direct path to commercialization, which will be really exciting as we move forward.
Well, good luck with that, James.
Thank you.
That's James Garner, CEO of Kazia Therapeutics.
Okay.